Katie Brooks walked through the busy market on Kepler 7 station like she belonged there. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail and her clothes looked cheap and worn. She carried an old datapad and moved slowly between the stalls where aliens from dozens of worlds sold their goods. To anyone watching, she looked like just another human trying to make a living in the Outer Rim territories. The station buzzed with activity as traders shouted prices and cargo. Haulers moved heavy containers through the wide corridors. Katie stopped at a fruit vendor run by a blue-skinned Altarian and bought some dried berries with the few credits she had left. The vendor barely looked at her as he handed over the small bag. Humans were still new to galactic trade, and most aliens saw them as poor and unimportant. Katie had been on the station for 3 weeks now, working as a shipping clerk for a small freight company called Star Runner Logistics. Her job was boring, and the pay was terrible, but it gave her access to the shipping manifests and cargo schedules she needed. Every day she watched ships come and go, noting which ones belonged to the Zephyrian crime families that controlled much of the illegal trade in this sector. The Zephyrians were reptilian beings, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light of the station corridors. They stood almost 8 feet tall, and their voices sounded like gravel being crushed. Most other species feared them because of their reputation for violence and their belief that they were superior to all other forms of life. They had been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years and looked down on newer species, like humans, as primitive and worthless. What the Zephyrians did not know was that Katie Brooks was not really a shipping clerk. Her real name was Agent K7, and she worked for Earth's Strategic Intelligence Division. She had spent 2 years training for this mission and another 6 months building her cover identity. The boring job and cheap clothes were all part of an elaborate deception designed to get her close to the Zephyrian operations without arousing suspicion. Katie had volunteered for this assignment after her younger brother, Danny, was killed in a Zephyrian raid on the human colony of New Boston. Danny had been working as a teacher in a small settlement when Zephyrian slavers attacked the planet. Most of the colonists were taken to work in the mines on distant worlds, but Danny had tried to protect his students and was shot down in the school courtyard. Katie had promised herself that day that she would make sure no other human families would suffer the same loss. The mission was dangerous beyond anything Earth's intelligence services had attempted before. Katie carried technology that was invisible to most alien scanners, including microscopic robots in her bloodstream that could record conversations and hack into computer systems. She also had combat training that would surprise anyone who saw her fight, though her orders were to avoid violence at all costs. If her cover was blown, she was supposed to run and hide until extraction could reach her. As Katie walked back toward the shipping offices, she noticed 3 Zephyrians following her. They stayed about 20 meters behind and tried to look casual, but their yellow eyes never left her. Katie felt her heart rate increase but kept walking at the same slow pace. She had been expecting this moment for weeks. The Zephyrians had finally decided to take a closer look at the quiet human girl who worked in the freight yards. The leader of the 3 was Commander Vex Morthan, though Katie did not know his name yet. Morthan was older than the others and had scars on his neck from fights with other Zephyrian warriors. He had been watching the human shipping operations for months, looking for weaknesses he could exploit. Something about the small human female had caught his attention, though he could not say exactly what it was. Katie turned into a storage bay that was usually empty during the evening shift. The bay was filled with metal containers and shipping equipment, creating lots of places to hide or be trapped, depending on how things went. She walked toward the back of the bay and pretended to check her datapad while listening for footsteps behind her. The 3 Zephyrians entered the bay and spread out to block her escape routes. Morthan stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear human language. His voice was cold and threatening as he asked Katie what she was really doing on the station. Katie looked up from her datapad with wide, frightened eyes and told him she was just a shipping clerk trying to earn enough money to get back to Earth. Morthan did not believe her. He had noticed that Katie always seemed to be in the right place to observe Zephyrian cargo transfers. He suspected she might be working for a rival crime family or possibly even for Earth intelligence. Either way, she had seen too much and knew. Too much to be allowed to leave the station alive. The interrogation began with simple questions about her work and her background. Katie answered everything in a scared, stammering voice, sticking to her cover story about being a desperate human who needed the job. But Morthen was experienced at reading people, and he could tell she was hiding something. He ordered his two assistants to restrain her while he prepared the neural disruptor. The neural disruptor was a Zephyrian torture device designed specifically to cause maximum pain to mammalian nervous systems. It sent electrical pulses through the victim's brain that felt like being burned alive from the inside. Most humans would break within minutes of exposure to the device, but Katie had been trained to resist interrogation techniques that were far worse than anything the Zephyrians could imagine. As the first wave of pain hit her, Katie screamed and begged them to stop. But inside her mind, she was already beginning to gather the intelligence that would eventually destroy the entire Zephyrian operation in this sector. The microscopic robots in her bloodstream were recording every word spoken in the room and beginning to map the computer networks that Morthen's communicator was connected to. Every moment of agony was serving a purpose that her torturers could never understand. The torture continued for hours as Morthen and his men took turns asking Katie questions about human shipping routes and colony defenses. Each time she gave them an answer they did not like. They increased the power on the neural disruptor until she screamed and collapsed. Katie played her role perfectly, giving them just enough false information to seem cooperative while protecting the real secrets that could harm human colonies. What the Zephyrians did not realize was that every word they spoke was being recorded by the tiny machines in Katie's blood. The robots were also copying data from Morthen's personal communicator every time he came close enough to touch her. Military codes, shipping schedules, and the locations of hidden Zephyrian bases were all flowing into Katie's memory storage systems while she pretended to be nothing more than a terrified victim. By the third day of captivity, Katie had gathered enough intelligence to cripple Zephyrian operations across 3 star systems. But the most important discovery came when Morthen received a coded message from his superiors. Katie's enhanced hearing picked up every word as he spoke to someone called Fleet Commander Zex about something called Operation Red Dawn. Operation Red Dawn was a massive military assault planned against Earth's outer colonies. The Zephyrians intended to attack 12 human worlds simultaneously, overwhelming their defenses and capturing millions of people to work as slaves in their mining operations. The attack was scheduled to begin in just 5 days, timed to coincide with the movement of Earth's main fleet to a distant sector for military exercises. Katie realized that this intelligence was worth more than her life. If Earth did not receive warning about Operation Red Dawn, millions of humans would die or be enslaved. She had to find a way to get a message home before it was too late to stop the attack. The opportunity came when Morthen left her alone with just one guard while he went to meet with other crime bosses on the station. Katie had been pretending to be unconscious for several hours, letting her body recover from the latest round of torture. When the guard turned his back to check his weapon, Katie activated the quantum communicator hidden in her dental work. The communicator was Earth's most advanced technology, capable of sending messages instantly across thousands of light years. But it was also extremely fragile and could only be used once before burning out. Katie had been saving it for exactly this moment when she had critical intelligence that could save lives. The message she sent was brief, but contained everything Earth needed to know. She transmitted her location, proof of the war crimes being committed against her, and most importantly, the complete details of Operation Red Dawn, including troop movements and target lists. She also included the access codes to the Zephyrian military database that her nano-robots had stolen from Morthen's communicator. The final part of her message was personal. She told Earth Command to contact her handler and give him a message for her brother's grave. She had kept her promise to make the Zephyrians pay for what they had done to Danny and the other colonists. Even if she died in this storage bay, the intelligence she had gathered would save countless other families from suffering the same loss. Seconds after she finished transmitting, The guard noticed the tiny flash of light from her mouth as the communicator burned out. He immediately called for Morthan, who returned within minutes and began searching Katie's body for hidden devices. When he found the melted remains of the quantum communicator, his yellow eyes filled with rage. Morthan realized that his prisoner was not just a shipping clerk or even a spy for a rival crime family. She was a trained Earth intelligence agent who had been gathering military secrets while pretending to be a helpless victim. The torture that followed was worse than anything Katie had endured before, as Morthan tried to find out how much information she had sent and who else might be working with her, but Katie revealed nothing more. She had completed her mission and transmitted the intelligence that could save millions of lives. Now all she had to do was survive long enough for rescue to arrive, though she knew the chances of extraction were very small. Earth's closest military units were weeks away, and the Zephyrians would probably kill her long before any help could reach Kepler-7 station on Earth. Director Helen Morrison of the Strategic Intelligence Division received Katie's transmission. In her secure office beneath the capital city, Helen had worked with Katie for 6 years and knew her capabilities better than anyone. She also knew that Katie would never have used the quantum communicator unless the situation was absolutely desperate. The intelligence in Katie's message was devastating. Operation Red Dawn would be the largest attack on human colonies in the brief history of Earth's expansion into space. 12 worlds with a combined population of over 8 million people were going to be attacked simultaneously by Zephyrian forces that outnumbered the local defense fleets by more than 10 to 1. Helen immediately called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. Within an hour, President Linda Hayes and the top military commanders were gathered in the Situation Room to hear Katie's recorded message. The room fell silent as they listened to her calm, professional voice describing the intelligence she had gathered while the sounds of her torture could be heard in the background. Admiral Jack Sullivan, head of Earth's Space Navy, was the first to speak after the recording ended. He wanted to send every available ship to rescue Katie and show the Zephyrians that Earth protected its people. But General Carmen Rodriguez of Special Operations Command had a different perspective. She had trained Katie personally and knew that the young woman would want them to use her intelligence to save the colonies rather than risk more lives trying to rescue her. The debate was intense, but brief. Katie's sacrifice had given them advance warning of an attack that could have destroyed Earth's expansion into space. They had 5 days to prepare defenses for 12 worlds and somehow turn the tables on an enemy that had been planning this operation for months. President Hayes made the final decision. Earth would mobilize every available ship and activate contingency plans that had been years in the making. They would also attempt to rescue Katie if possible, but not at the cost of letting Operation Red Dawn succeed. Katie had given them the tools to save millions of lives, and they were going to use those tools effectively. As emergency orders went out across Earth's military networks, Helen Morrison sent one more message. Deep cover agents throughout Zephyrian space received coded transmissions that activated sleeper cells that had been dormant for years. Katie's courage was about to inspire a resistance movement that would span dozens of worlds and bring the Zephyrian crime empire to its knees. Earth's response to Katie's intelligence was swift and coordinated across multiple fronts. President Hayes activated Protocol Zero, a contingency plan that had been developed in secret over the past 5 years. The protocol assumed that Earth would eventually face a threat that required every available resource and agent to work together in perfect coordination. Admiral Sullivan began moving Earth's fleet into new positions based on the intelligence Katie had provided. The Zephyrians believed that Earth's main battle groups were conducting exercises in a distant sector, but those exercises had been a deception designed to hide the fleet's true capabilities. Within hours of receiving Katie's message, Earth's most powerful warships were moving toward the 12 target worlds that Operation Red Dawn planned to attack. At the same time, General Rodriguez activated sleeper agents throughout Zephyrian space. These agents had been living normal lives as merchants, mechanics, and freight workers for years, waiting for the signal that would turn them into saboteurs. They received their orders through hidden channels and began preparing to strike at Zephyrian infrastructure at exactly the right moment. Commander Ryan Peterson received his orders while leading a reconnaissance mission near the border between human and Zephyrian space. Ryan was one of Earth's most experienced special operations officers and had worked with Katie during her training. When he learned that she was being held prisoner on Kepler-7 station, he volunteered immediately to lead the rescue mission. Ryan's team consisted of 12 specialists trained in zero-gravity combat and alien technology. They traveled in a stealth ship designed to look like a damaged freighter, complete with fake emergency signals and a story about engine problems that needed repair. The plan was to dock at Kepler-7 station, locate Katie, and extract her before the Zephyrians realized what was happening, but Ryan knew the mission was extremely dangerous. Kepler-7 was deep in the Zephyrian territory and heavily defended. Even if they found Katie alive, getting her out would require fighting through dozens of guards and security systems. The chances of success were less than 30%, and the chances of the entire team surviving were even lower. While Ryan's team traveled toward Kepler-7, the sleeper agents across Zephyrian space began their operations. On the mining world of Carex Prime, a human maintenance worker named Bill Santos had been secretly mapping the planet's power grid for 3 years. When he received his activation code, Bill planted explosive charges at key transformer stations. That would shut down mining operations across the entire continent. On the trading hub of Nexus Station, a human merchant named Lisa Park had been slowly poisoning the water supply systems with a delayed action virus that would cause massive equipment failures. Lisa had been selling cleaning supplies to Zephyrian facilities for 2 years, gaining access to systems that most aliens never bothered to guard properly. In the asteroid belt around Vega 4, a human cargo pilot named Steve Morris had been delivering supplies to a secret Zephyrian military base. Steve's ship was equipped with hidden scanning equipment that had been mapping the base's defenses and weapon systems. When he received his orders, Steve transmitted the complete layout of the base to Earth Command, and then sabotaged the base's communication array. The coordinated attacks began exactly 72 hours after Katie's message reached Earth. Across a dozen star systems, Zephyrian operations suddenly began experiencing mysterious failures. Power grids collapsed, communication networks went dark, and supply lines that had operated smoothly for years suddenly stopped functioning. The Zephyrians initially believed they were experiencing random equipment failures or attacks by rival crime families. They had no idea that the quiet humans they barely noticed were systematically destroying their infrastructure from within. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late to stop the cascade of failures that was spreading across their territory. Fleet Commander Zex received the first reports of the sabotage while reviewing final preparations for Operation Red Dawn. The attacks were clearly coordinated and targeted at facilities that were critical to the upcoming assault on human colonies. Zex realized that somehow Earth had learned about the operation and was striking back with capabilities that Zephyrian intelligence had never suspected. The most shocking discovery came when Zex tried to access the military database that contained the detailed plans for Operation Red Dawn. The database had been completely copied and then infected with a virus that began deleting critical files. Backup systems that should have been isolated from outside networks had somehow been compromised. Someone had gained access to the most secure Zephyrian military systems and stolen everything. Zex immediately suspected that the human prisoner being held by Morthan on Kepler-7 station was somehow connected to the intelligence breach. He sent orders for Morthan to extract every piece of information from the prisoner using any means necessary. He also dispatched additional security forces to the station in case Earth tried to mount a rescue operation, but Morthan never received those orders. The communication virus that Katie's nano-robots had planted in his personal communicator had spread to the station's main systems and was systematically corrupting message traffic. Orders were being delayed, garbled, or lost completely. The additional security forces Zex had sent were diverted to other stations by false orders that appeared to come from legitimate command channels on Earth. Admiral Sullivan watched the reports coming in from across Zephyrian space with amazement. The sabotage operations were working better than anyone had dared to hope. Katie's intelligence had not only warned them about Operation Red Dawn, it had also provided the access codes and system vulnerabilities that made the coordinated attacks possible. President Hayes addressed the Earth Defense Council as reports continued to flow in from the field operations. The Zephyrian assault fleet was experiencing massive logistical problems as their supply bases went offline. Communication between their ships was becoming increasingly unreliable. Most importantly, the detailed plans for Operation Red Dawn had been compromised, forcing them to either cancel the attack or proceed with incomplete information, but Hayes knew that the battle was far from over. The Zephyrians still had superior numbers and firepower, even with their logistical problems. If they decided to proceed with Operation Red Dawn despite the setbacks, Earth's colonies would still face a devastating assault. Everything now depended on whether Ryan Peterson could rescue Katie and whether the continuing sabotage operations could buy enough time for Earth's fleet to reach the target worlds. General Rodriguez reported that contact with several sleeper agents had been lost, suggesting that the Zephyrians were beginning to realize they had been infiltrated. The window for covert operations was closing rapidly. Soon the conflict would move from the shadows into open warfare, where Earth's advantages would be much smaller. Helen Morrison reviewed Katie's file one more time as she waited for news from the rescue mission. Katie had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in Earth's intelligence history, knowing that she would probably not survive. But her courage had already saved millions of lives and given humanity a fighting chance against an enemy that had seemed impossible to defeat. The message that Katie had risked everything to send was now bearing fruit across dozens of worlds. The quiet human girl that the Zephyrians had tortured for information had turned out to be Earth's most valuable asset, and her sacrifice was about to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Commander Ryan Peterson's stealth ship docked at Kepler 7 station, just as the first reports of sabotage operations began reaching Zephyrian command centers. The station was in chaos as security teams tried to track down communication failures and mysterious equipment malfunctions. Ryan's team used the confusion to their advantage. Moving through maintenance corridors toward the detention levels where Katie was being held, the virus that Katie's nano-robots had planted was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Security cameras throughout the station were displaying false images while the real feeds were being recorded by Earth intelligence. Door locks were opening at random intervals, forcing guards to abandon their posts to investigate security breaches that did not actually exist. Ryan's team reached the detention level without firing a single shot. Katie was barely conscious when Ryan found her in the makeshift torture chamber that Morthan had set up in Storage Bay 7. She had been subjected to 3 days of interrogation with neural disruptors and other Zephyrian torture devices designed to break the will of mammalian species. But when Ryan called her name, her eyes opened and focused on his face with surprising clarity. Katie's first words were not about her condition or her pain. She asked Ryan if her message had reached Earth and whether the colonies were being evacuated. When Ryan told her that Earth had received her intelligence and was already responding to the threat, Katie smiled for the first time since her capture. She had completed her mission and the sacrifice had been worth it, but Katie had one more surprise for her captors. As Ryan's team prepared to extract her from the station, Katie activated the final phase of her mission. The nanorobots in her bloodstream had been programmed with a secondary function that she had kept secret even from her handlers at Earth Command. They contained a virus specifically designed to target Zephyrian computer systems using vulnerabilities that only Katie knew about. The nanorobots released the virus into the station's computer network through Morthan's communicator, which had been in close contact with Katie for days. Within minutes, the virus began spreading to every connected system throughout Zephyrian space. Fleet coordination networks crashed as ships lost the ability to communicate with their commanders. Weapon systems began experiencing random malfunctions that made them unreliable in combat. Most critically, the detailed invasion plans for Operation Red Dawn were automatically transmitted to every major government in the galaxy. As Ryan's team fought their way back through the station toward their ship, Katie insisted on walking under her own power despite her injuries. She had spent 3 days pretending to be helpless and broken, but now she could reveal the training and determination that had made her one of Earth's most elite agents. The Zephyrian guards who tried to stop them discovered that the quiet human girl they had been torturing was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The escape from Kepler 7 station became a running battle through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. Katie's virus had shut down life support systems and artificial gravity in several sections, forcing both humans and Zephyrians to fight in conditions that favored the lighter and more agile human forces. Ryan's team used their zero-gravity combat training to outmaneuver guards who were struggling to adapt to the changing environment. Morthen arrived at the detention level just as Ryan's ship was departing from the station. The Zephyrian commander watched helplessly as his prized prisoner escaped, taking with her the secrets that could destroy his entire organization. But Morthen's rage turned to horror when he realized that Katie had left him a parting gift. His personal communicator began displaying classified Zephyrian military documents that were being broadcast across every news network in the galaxy. The evidence of Zephyrian war crimes spread through galactic communication networks faster than any military force could move to stop it. Katie's recordings of her own torture were combined with proof of planned genocide against human colonies and evidence of slavery operations that violated every treaty the Zephyrians had signed. Species that had remained neutral in human-Zephyrian conflicts were horrified by what they saw. The Altarian Republic, the galaxy's most respected democracy, issued an immediate condemnation of Zephyrian actions and offered military support to Earth. The peaceful Centauri Federation, which had previously avoided taking sides in any conflict, began mobilizing their defensive fleets to protect shipping lanes from Zephyrian raiders. Even species that were traditionally hostile to humans found themselves siding with Earth against the Reptilian Empire. Fleet Commander Zex watched his carefully planned invasion collapse in real time as the virus Katie had planted continued to spread through Zephyrian networks. Ship commanders were receiving contradictory orders from computer systems that could no longer be trusted. Supply convoys were being diverted to empty space by navigation systems that had been corrupted. Worst of all, the element of surprise that Operation Red Dawn had depended on was completely gone, but Zex was not ready to abandon his plans for conquest. The Zephyrian military had been preparing for this assault for months, and their ships were already in position near the target worlds. Even with the communication problems and logistical failures, they still had overwhelming numerical superiority over Earth's colonial defense forces. Zex decided to proceed with a modified version of Operation Red Dawn, hoping to achieve victory through sheer force of numbers. The decision to attack despite the setbacks was exactly what Earth's strategists had been hoping for. Admiral Sullivan had positioned his fleet based on Katie's intelligence about Zephyrian attack plans, but he needed the enemy to commit to their assault before Earth's trap could be sprung. When Zephyrian forces began moving toward the target worlds, Sullivan gave the order for Earth's hidden battle groups to reveal themselves. Katie recovered aboard Ryan's ship as it raced back toward Earth space, but she insisted on participating in the coming battle from the command center of Earth Defense Station. Her intelligence had given humanity every possible advantage, but she wanted to see the mission through to its conclusion. She had promised her brother Danny that the Zephyrians would pay for their crimes, and that promise would not be fulfilled. Until their military was defeated, the final phase of the conflict was about to begin, and it would take place in Earth's own solar system. Morthen had escaped from Kepler 7 station and was rallying the most fanatical elements of the Zephyrian military for a desperate assault on humanity's homeworld. He believed that if Earth itself could be conquered, the human colonial empire would collapse regardless of what happened to Operation Red Dawn. But Morthen was about to learn the same lesson that countless other enemies had discovered throughout human history. Attacking Earth was not just a military mistake, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of what humanity was capable of when their survival was at stake. The quiet species that had seemed so weak and primitive was about to demonstrate why they had earned their place among the stars through courage rather than technology. As Katie took her position in the Defense Command Center, she could see Earth's blue and white surface through the station's observation windows. Somewhere down there was the grave where her brother Danny was buried, along with the graves of thousands of other humans who had died in Zephyrian attacks. The coming battle would determine whether those deaths had been in vain or whether they had inspired a resistance that would protect future generations from the same fate. The final battle began when Morthen's fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. The Zephyrian commander had gathered every ship he could find after the collapse of Operation Red Dawn, creating a desperate armada of warships, transports, and converted civilian vessels. His plan was simple and brutal: destroy Earth's orbital defenses, land troops on the planet's surface, and hold the human homeworld hostage until the colonial empire surrendered. What Morthen did not know was that Earth had been preparing for exactly this scenario since the first human colony was established. The solar system's defenses were far more extensive than any alien intelligence service had discovered. Hidden weapon platforms floated silent and dark among the asteroids, while defensive minefields stretched across the most likely approach routes to Earth. Katie watched the enemy fleets approach from the command center of Earth Defense Station, her body still bearing the marks of Zephyrian torture, but her mind focused entirely on the battle ahead. Admiral Sullivan had given her access to all tactical information as a courtesy, but Katie's real contribution was the detailed intelligence she had gathered about Zephyrian ship capabilities and command structures. The virus Katie had planted continued to wreak havoc on Zephyrian systems even as their ships moved toward Earth. Communication between vessels was sporadic and unreliable, forcing commanders to rely on visual signals and outdated tactical plans. Weapon targeting systems were experiencing random calibration errors that made long-range fire wildly inaccurate. Most importantly, the command hierarchy was breaking down as orders from fleet commanders were being garbled or lost entirely. Earth's response was swift and coordinated. The hidden weapon platforms revealed themselves as Morthen's fleet entered the outer system, launching missile swarms that caught the Zephyrians completely by surprise. Admiral Sullivan's battle groups emerged from behind the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, using gravitational slingshot maneuvers to accelerate to attack speed while remaining hidden until the last possible moment. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Earth's forces fought with the desperate courage of a species defending their homeworld, using tactics that combined advanced technology with a willingness to take risks that more cautious civilizations would never attempt. Human pilots rammed damaged ships into Zephyrian vessels when their weapons failed, while boarding parties fought through breached hulls to capture enemy bridges. Morthen's flagship pushed through the outer defenses toward Earth itself, its heavy armor allowing it to absorb punishment that would have destroyed smaller vessels. The Zephyrian commander was determined to reach the planet's surface and prove that his species could not be defeated by primitive humans. But as his ship approached Earth's atmosphere, it encountered the final layer of the planet's defense network. Earth's orbital defense stations had been built over decades by human engineers, who understood that their species would always be outnumbered by potential enemies. The stations were designed to create overlapping fields of fire that could destroy even the largest ships, while automated systems ensured that the defenses would continue fighting even if the crews were killed. Morthen's flagship was caught in a crossfire that shredded its armor and left it drifting helplessly in space. Katie requested permission to address the surviving Zephyrian forces as their resistance began to collapse. Admiral Sullivan was surprised by the request, but he recognized that Katie had earned the right to speak for all the humans who had suffered under Zephyrian attacks. Her voice was broadcast across all frequencies as she spoke directly to Morthen and his remaining commanders. Katie's words were simple and direct. She identified herself as the human prisoner who had been tortured on Kepler-7 station and explained how her suffering had led to the intelligence that made Earth's victory possible. She told the Zephyrians that humans did not forget attacks. on innocent people and that they would never stop fighting to protect those they loved. Most importantly, she made it clear that the galaxy had witnessed what happened when anyone tried to hurt Earth's people. Morthan's response was filled with rage and disbelief. He could not accept that his advanced civilization had been defeated by a species that had only reached the stars a few decades earlier. He demanded to know how primitive humans had developed the technology and tactics that had destroyed his fleet. His final message was a promise that other Zephyrian forces would continue the war until humanity was completely destroyed. Admiral Sullivan's reply was broadcast to every ship in the system and recorded for transmission throughout the galaxy. He explained that Earth's victory had not come from superior technology or larger numbers. It had come from the willingness of people like Katie to sacrifice themselves for others and the determination of an entire species to protect their families and communities. He warned that any future attacks on human colonies would be met with the same response that had destroyed Morthan's fleet. The battle ended when Morthan's flagship exploded, taking the Zephyrian commander and his remaining crew with it. The few surviving enemy ships surrendered or fled into hyperspace, carrying word of Earth's victory back to Zephyrian territory. The threat of Operation Red Dawn was over, and the galaxy had learned that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. In the aftermath of the battle, Katie received offers of every honor that Earth could bestow. The president wanted to give her the highest medal for courage, while the military offered her any position she wanted in the intelligence services. But Katie quietly declined most of the recognition and returned to active duty within a month of her rescue. She had work to do and promises to keep. The memorial service for her brother Danny was held in the small cemetery where the colonists from New Boston were buried. Katie stood at Danny's grave and told him that his death had not been forgotten and that the people responsible had been brought to justice. She also promised that no other families would suffer the same loss if she could prevent it. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but humanity was no longer helpless against those who would harm innocent people. Katie's new assignment took her back into the shadows where Earth's intelligence agents worked to protect human colonies from threats they would never see coming. She disappeared once again into the vast galaxy as an unremarkable civilian, her true identity known only to a few people in Earth's government. But now, whenever other species encountered a lone human in their midst, they remembered the lesson of Katie Brooks, the quiet girl who had seemed so helpless during her torture, had turned out to be Earth's most dangerous weapon. Her willingness to endure any suffering to protect others had become a symbol of humanity's greatest strength. The galaxy had learned that humans might be new to the cosmic community and they might not have the most advanced technology, but they possessed something that many older civilizations had lost: the absolute refusal to abandon those they had sworn to protect. The story of Katie Brooks spread throughout human space and beyond, inspiring a new generation of young people to serve their species with the same courage and dedication. Her example showed that sometimes the greatest victories came not from overwhelming force or superior technology, but from the willingness of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when the lives of others depended on their actions.